Welcome to another episode of my series, Mystic Minds with K Mystic, where I represent something that I like to call the mystic veil, the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. I've decided to create a new sector of Mystic Minds with K Mystic called Realm File Unclassified Edition. What is the Shadow Realm? So, in Yu-Gi-Oh, right, the Shadow Realm is basically a parallel dimension to Earth, which represents basically the darker nature or somewhere where people get banished in Yu-Gi-Oh. Someone that actually introduced me to the spirituality and metaphysics, he used to talk about the Shadow Realm in a different way, not actually related to the show Yu-Gi-Oh. I actually haven't seen this show Yu-Gi-Oh, but I'm using the word Shadow Realm in relation to basically the calypodic side of the universe, right? We're not going to be talking or teaching about the left-hand path, but I will be using darker entities to kind of talk about the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds and how this may relate to our human lives on the planet. This episode will be about the solar demon Sorath. Who and what are the dark forces? So the dark forces can kind of be an umbrella term for multiple different entities. A lot of people like to use demons as the umbrella term for the whole concept of dark forces when there's actually multiple different variations of beings that can be the dark forces. Beings like elementals, beings from other realms, extraterrestrials, the negative ones, and negative entities. Now, these forces pursue multiple agendas. Some are openly adversarial to humanity, Earth, and peace. In esoteric systems, dark forces aren't cartoonish villains or the bad guys, but they function more like an intricate, highly detailed government system. For example, right, there might be particular beings that they have a system going on. There's rankings, there's hierarchies, there's different agendas that they pursue. Right? Let's say you were to meet someone and they say, hey, the CIA is after me. Well, you'd have to ask them, well, what type of things are you up to? Do you do research for NASA on, ultra terrestrial humans from the future? Do you do research for, interdimensional devices and stuff like that you shouldn't be sharing to the public? Anti-gravity spaceships, right? If you're not necessarily doing that type of stuff, someone might ask you, then why is the CIA after you? You have to be doing something to get their attention. That's kind of like demons. Demons, if you want to use the original framework of what a demon is, one of the first groups of angels to leave the creator, right? They kind of have the title of demon. If you're talking about these forces and their descendants, these are hundreds of millions or billion-year-old beings that you have to ask yourself, what do they want with me? Majority of them that are on that level, they're not really worried about the average person. They might send someone that's doing the bidding, for example, a negative entity, in the framework of their system. So, for example, let's say they have a system of some type of spiritual database of people that are going to change the world and they want to keep humanity down. Well, let's say there's a beacon lit off of someone that's going to be doing something that's going to benefit humanity or higher forces, positive forces, then this system may trigger something that is going to send a negative entity to basically disrupt this person. Hey, you can go make this person depressed, make them not want to do anything with their life, make them think of self-destructive thoughts, and ensure that they waste as much time as possible to never, ever, ever stand up and do the thing that they're supposed to be doing, right? This is what I mean by intricate, highly organized system. It doesn't really happen like, strolling down the street, there's a human down there, let me go bother them. No, it's a system that they have that basically operates with the agenda of darkness, chaos, and destruction. In esoteric systems, dark forces are not evil in the way that we understand them in terms of movies and TV shows. I know it's hard to believe, but a lot of them have, so to say, you can call them families, friends, groups that they bond with. I hate to say it like that, but it's true. A lot of them have their own worlds, dimensions, civilizations where they might do things that you probably would think that is kind of crazy or unique, right? The reason why I bring this up is that a lot of people think that things happen for no reason. When bad things happen, they say, well, why? why would a being or entity do something like that? Or why would someone do something like this? Well, on the other side of the universe, to use simple terms, there are beings that their role and their essence is destruction and chaos. Now, on their side of the universe, this isn't destruction or chaos. This may seem like something that is absurd to us, but when they're just minding their business and doing whatever they do on their side of the realm or dimensions, whatever you want to call it, the universe has no issue with them. The universe isn't calling them bad or evil, but on planet Earth, these things may manifest things like illnesses, mental health issues, destructive choices, destructive behaviors. For example, drugs. I have to be careful with what I talk about, right? Because this is the mystic veil, the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds, K Mystic's interpretation of supernatural phenomena. But for example, drugs. There is a dark side of the universe called the Qliphoth, right? Which basically governs and harms a lot of these things that we call dark forces and negative energies. When you do drugs, these burn holes in your consciousness that lets these energies seep through into your life. Now, slowly but surely, you may be doing things that are destructive or things that you may never have done, but now you are giving energy to these to the Qliphotic side of your essence, your humanity, right? Because there's both. There's the Seraphotic and there's the Qliphotic. The Seraphotic is the angelic side of you, and the Qliphotic is your dark side. So when you do these drugs, these things actually end up seeping through you. And this is basically how the dark forces operate, by doing things that cause destructive habits or things that basically open you up to darkness, right? These beings are adversarial towards humanity for multiple different of reasons. Some of them kind of see people as food. Some people see people as slaves. Some of them think that they own humanity and that, they can basically do whatever they want because basically, we're too slow to understand, or majority of people don't believe it. So they basically think that they can do whatever they want. Now, I saw a video the other day of this guy. He went viral because he was burning a bunch of ants in multiple different ways, pouring fire on them, putting them on a pan, etc., etc. And there was multiple different people in the comment section that were mad about it, that didn't like it. I didn't like it. I don't know why someone would use their free will to do that, but this is kind of how the dark forces operate. In the universe, there are beings that kind of view humanity like that. The ants to basically do what they want. I don't agree with it, but I didn't make up the rules, right? Now, let's talk about the solar demon Sorath. The solar demon Sorath represents the counterpart to the sun's positive qualities like beauty, harmony, consciousness. Sorath governs its inversion, ego inflation, spiritual blindness, and devouring of illumination. So the sun has extremely positive qualities, right? When I made the video, The Misconceptions of Heaven, I talk about different ways that souls are granted access to heaven. One of the ways I talked about was the Merkaba, or the light body. In esoteric systems, how people achieve the light body is by doing solar practices. A lot of these solar practices include things that basically break down solar light into your nervous system, and this ends up building a vessel of consciousness that allows you to enter once you pass away. This grants you access to higher worlds and celestial realms. Now, one of the main ways to do this is by the practice of accessing the emotion of joy. Now, this entity represents the opposite of that process. So, for example, beauty, harmony, and consciousness, he is adversarial to those things. His nature is one of extremely solar inversion, seeking to sever humanity's connection to higher spiritual realms, prevent the destined spiritual union of Earth and the Sun, and to ultimately destroy the individual human I, the internal self. So his main functions and role is to basically disconnect you from your true inner being, your higher self, right? That's why one of his agendas is to promote extreme nihilism. You know those people that say, oh, we're just floating on a rock so nothing matters. I remember I saw this video of this person, right? She was saying, guys, if you're 40 years old, don't feel bad for not doing the things that you need to be doing because it doesn't matter. we're just on a floating rock, we're just in the universe. Now, I'm not here to say that this is the entity that's influencing her mind to say this, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to put these wild claims on people. But what I'm trying to say is, in the framework of this entity's agendas, that would be something that it would like to promote. Non-spiritual evolution, non-self growth, non-connection with spiritual forces. Nothing matters. Do nothing. Don't seek, higher knowledge. Don't seek any inner growth or evolution. Nothing matters, It's kind of like a trance, right? But unlike demons of darkness, it operates through excess light, blinding, consuming, and burning away spiritual discernment rather than hiding in its shadows. It's not about deceptions or materialism, but total annihilation of the human spirit's capacity for divine connection. I'm not really into astrology, right? I'm really not. I think I find it interesting, but I never really got into it to research it. But one thing that I do know about astrology is that there are particular archangels that rule over planets. Now, you might be asking yourself, right, when you're looking at people that talk about full moon rituals, that talk about this spell and that spell and doing it at this time and doing it at this day, you might say, well, why does that matter? Because in esoteric systems, archangels rule over particular planets. They don't have days or jobs like we do, but a lot of them, they might have the role. For example, you need to send this energy current or node to this specific ley line on the planet at this time, at this second, so creation can run. Enforce the laws of the universe, and they ensure that creation runs for the creator, right? Now, that's why you can't really do things whenever you want, because there's certain energies that rule over particular times of the day. Now, this entity represents the complete opposite of this. Because just like there's positive forces that rule through particular times of the day, when the when the clock strikes 12, there are other types of beings that come into fruition that rules how the destructive and chaotic side of the universe is supposed to run. Sorath represents the archetype of corrupted solar power, which govern things like high levels of success, fame, and authority. It's what happens when illumination becomes narcissism, will becomes domination, and spiritual fire consumes rather than transforms. So there are solar energies, right, in esoteric frameworks that govern things like extreme levels of success, fame, etc., etc. Things like being a famous athlete, things like being a famous musician, things like extreme levels of talent. The solar demon Sorath represents all the negative things that come with this stuff. So, for example, damaging levels of ego, narcissism, using fame for negative things. Basically, the destruction of all of the positive qualities that someone can do with the positive aspects of the sun. The reason why this demon is important is because this isn't a cartoon level force. This isn't a, la-di-da-di-da, let's go bother humans. This entity represents the opposite side of spiritual evolution, spiritual growth, and ascension to higher levels of reality. Conclusion. In the movie They Live, he puts on glasses, right? And he sees the bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. In the movie, the world is controlled by a sinister alien being who broadcasts subliminal message of obedience, consume, conformality through everyday media and advertising. This is a very important example within this episode because you never know the forces that are influencing our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day basis, right? Now, we're not going to use external forces. We're just going to talk about internal forces. Have you ever needed to do something that was going to change your life and every single part of you did not want to do it? Because there's a part of us that wants things to stay exactly how it is, exactly the same. Now, if you were to turn this into reverse in the external level, on a way higher level, there are extremely dark forces that want the same for humanity. They want everything to stay exactly how it is, exactly the same, if not even worse. Could it be possible that our everyday thoughts and beliefs are being subtly influenced by forces from the unseen worlds? Are we being guided towards love, compassion, and spiritual evolution, or are we being pulled to extreme nihilism, narcissism, and destructive negative behaviors operating behind the veil? And that concludes another episode of Mystic Minds with K Mystic, Realm File Unclassified Edition, the Solar Demon Sorath.